Hi, my name is Denise Cajola, and I am a divorce coach and family mediator with my company called It Takes Three Mediation. I facilitate a divorce care class on Monday nights, and we cover all kinds of topics that are areas that people are experiencing while in separation or divorce. And our topic on Monday night happened to be about anger. So I wanted to talk about that today and talk about facing our anger in hopes that it might help some of you as well. The first thing that I wanted to review in my notes was what anger really is. Anger is an emotion. There's nothing wrong with it. It's more what we do with our anger than the emotion itself that makes it a challenge. But it really just signifies that something is wrong. Anger is a thing we do more than a thing we have. So I think sometimes people look at anger and say, we have anger. But anger is really more of a doing than a having. And I think that's important to look at when we're looking at anger. It's really not a neutral response. It's either good or bad. There's really no in between with anger. And that's one thing I think that unsettles people when they consider conflict and anger is that, there is a good and there is a bad side to it. It's really a dangerous emotion. Mostly it's dangerous because we operate under this assumption that we are always right. And this makes it very dangerous when we're angry because if we think we're always right, we begin to stop thinking. We begin to stop evaluating. We feel justified at being the judge, and we don't make good decisions, and we don't react in a way that might help the situation. We tend to look for correctiveness instead of the ultimate good out of the situation. And the aspect that I really want you mostly to focus on here is that when you are angry, you believe you're right, you believe you're justified, you're a judge, and so you really tune out what the other person is having to say. And this is something that I work with as a mediator or a coach in trying to help people take a look at what the other person is hearing and what they are thinking at the same time. If you can do that yourselves during the aspect of being angry, which I know is kind of hard to do, that will help matters as well. Let's look at some unhealthy expressions of anger. The first one, of course, that comes to mind is violence itself. And I know that even people that are not typically angry people, through separation or divorce, they can feel that they're really not themselves. They may be much more angry than they normally are and are really surprised at their reaction. I know I was, and I don't tend to be someone that likes to move towards any kind of physical conflict itself, but I was amazed at how angry I had become and how easy it was for me to feel the need to strike out more than I would have in the past. So one of the areas that's very unhealthy, of course, is violence. And in some relationships, there is violence anyway in the relationships, and I encourage those people to get some help for that violence. In others, there may not have been violence, but there may be actions now that are just not natural compared to the normal relationship. And it would certainly not be a healthy way to act out when you're angry in a violent manner. The second way that people act out is really suppressing it or stuffing it. If your natural tendency is to just kind of suppress it and stuff it and say, hey, this is going to go away, this will get better, a little more conflict avoidant, or maybe your partner, your ex-spouse or your spouse is one that tends to stuff it, then you might be familiar with the trait that once you stuff it and stuff it and stuff it, it ultimately will blow like a volcano. You'll be able to take it and take it and take it, and then all of a sudden you'll just blow your top. And generally that other individual, when you blow your top, is really confused, because the one act that blew your top is not generally everything that's gone on. And so they are very, very, very confused as to why this one thing blew your top, when realistically the suppressing is what caused that. And so it's very unhealthy. It knots you up, and it's not a good way of handling anger. You've got to be able to face that anger and be able to have some tactful conversations. Another way that people handle anger is more passive aggressive. And I see this definitely in my work with individuals where their mode of conflict is a little more passive aggressive, meaning there's someone who generally almost always is a little more aggressive, really wants to deal with a matter, wants to talk about it, and the other person feels trapped, moves back, and they will tend to walk out of the room. That walking out of the room really controls the conflict, controls the conversation, controls the anger, and it passes them over, right over to them. And that only inflames the other individual that's trying to really get their point across. So another unhealthy way is to passive aggressively express yourself, which means that you may start and then you just walk away and nothing ever really gets resolved. Another way that I see during my line of work is just getting revenge. And I can understand someone who's very angry, very upset. They didn't expect their marriage to end. They didn't expect the circumstances to happen. And sometimes some of the most passive people will be the ones to actually get revenge. Revenge just might be in blasting a lot of emails, a lot of texting, actually saying, hey, no, you can't have the kids this weekend. Those kinds of things are definitely ways of getting revenge, and that is just not a healthy way to move forward, try to work through your anger, and even just try to have an ongoing relationship, after the divorce itself. So all of those areas are really unhealthy ways of expressing anger. Lastly, let's talk about some healthy ways to get rid of anger. And one of those ways that I think about is really more in the area of looking at control. And so much of what we do, especially during separation and divorce, is that we really want to seize control of the situation, and we really want our spouse or significant others to do what we want them to do. We really want to control the circumstances. We feel that if we can do that, things will be so much better. And the interesting thing about control is that when you try to seize control like that, you are actually giving power to the other individual. And that may seem strange, because as you are pushing for control, they actually are gaining the control by not doing what you're asking them to do. So in a sense, you are giving them the power that you so desperately wanted. And so there's a little bit of reverse psychology here, in the sense that you will want to release control in order to actually gain control. And I know that is something that really has to be mastered. Being a faith-based person, I like to think that I would give control over to God instead of trying to control myself for the circumstances that are there. That sort of gives me an opportunity to not have to judge myself or to look at the success or failure that I'm having and trying to control the circumstances as well. But so one of the healthy ways to kind of get rid of anger is to think about that word control, and to relinquish that control as much as possible. Another way of being able to have some healthy look at anger would be just to avoid conflicts. And I realize we can't avoid all conflicts, and there are some people that really live and breathe a little bit more in the area of conflict, meaning they're more comfortable with it. I work with many individuals that are more comfortable with conflict because that's how they were raised, or that's how their job environment is. And sometimes it's just a manner of their nature or the way they speak, and others that came from a family or they're in a work environment that doesn't allow for any type of voice raising, any type of conflict discussion at all. And so there's not a lot of practice with those people in regards to conflict. And so whichever area you fall in, if you fall in an area where you tend to be more comfortable with conflict, I would challenge you to decide what battles do you want to take on, because you can't take on every battle. That just isn't going to work. Most of us that have kids, we know that, but especially in our personal relationships. But secondarily, if you are a conflict avoidant person, then you might want to decide which conflicts are you going to step up and challenge yourself to actually discuss. But avoiding conflict, areas that you know are trigger spots, you know your spouse, you know your significant other, you know what triggers them. So you may want to consider avoiding some of those topic areas. Another healthy way of dealing with anger is just physical exercise. That seems simple, but especially going through divorce or separation, we are more exhausted to begin with because our emotions are so high, that I do encourage you to get out, walk outside, get some fresh air. If you are upset or you've had some text or some emails or some phone conversations that are very challenging, try to get some physical exercise. That will help your body overall and help you calm down and move away from anger itself. Because you really need to guide your thoughts, which is another thing, to guide your thoughts to more positive thoughts. We tend to replay all of those negative thoughts over and over again that we might have heard from our spouse, or might have heard in the past growing up, and they keep replaying over and over again. And you really need to fill those with positive thoughts. So for instance, if you keep hearing that, well, that's fine, we'll divorce, no one likes you anyway, no one's going to be your friend anyway, you're not going to have any money anyway, keep in mind that you would fill it with a positive thought that is more accurate, which is, hey, you have friends, you know who those friends are, you can name off those friends and know that that's an untrue statement that you won't have friends. Or that you might have less money, and sure, it's going to be a difficult situation, but at the end of the day, you can keep yourself in a financial state that will take care of yourself, and you know that, and you can fill yourself with positive thoughts along those lines. You've got to guide your mind in these areas because it is going to tend to fill with all of the negative things that are out there. One of the last things would be that you can have some assertive anger, but assertive anger doesn't have to mean that you have to raise your voice. You don't have to be combative. That is really hard for me. So if you're angry, keep in mind that if you tend to be someone who raises their voice, that you want to take it down a notch or two, which means your assertiveness needs to tone down. And again, for those that are not used to being assertive, that you can, in a simple, clear manner, go ahead and express yourself. Now, the key thing to remember here is just because you express yourself does not mean that the other person is going to accept what you have to say. They could laugh it off, they could poo-poo it, they might be shocked that you even had anything to say, but their reaction is not probably going to be what you think it's going to be. But it doesn't mean that you didn't voice your opinion, you didn't voice your anger and your assertiveness, and that's okay, because the outcome is not going to always be what you want it to be. As we look at all this, I'd like to close in saying that it is a difficult time. Anger is a common reaction. You'll feel like you get past anger, and then you're moving along and things are better, and all of a sudden you get hit. It could be a year later and you get hit with anger again, over a similar topic. And just know that it's an up and down cycle like most of these emotions. We'll be speaking to some of the other emotions as we move forward, but I just thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today and facing your anger, and welcome the opportunity for you to comment on this blog or comment back to me or give me a call if I can help in any way. Again, this is Denise Cajola. I own a company called It Takes Three Mediation. Thank you.